Week 15 of the fantasy football season. Here's top 12 tight ends. I'm ranking this week. Number 1, Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, Travis Kelce, another monster season. Best tight end once again in fantasy football and in the NFL this season. And this week here, great matchup at the Houston Texans. That obviously can't stop anyone. And it wouldn't be surprising to me if Kelce has a 25, 30-point game in this one in Houston. And he's a guy you fire up each and every week, obviously. And he's number 1 this week. Number 2, TJ Hockenson of the Minnesota Vikings. So Hockenson, it's been a good landing spot for him going to Minnesota at the NFL trade deadline. And this week here, a pretty good matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts. And like I said, TJ Hockenson, weekly, he's a guy that's probably going to be top 3, top 5 at worst at the tight end position. But this week here, I got him in number 2. Mark Andrews, the last few weeks here, definitely hasn't been 100% healthy and underwhelming. And also, if Lamar Jackson's out, his numbers could take a little bit of a hit as well. So this week, that's why I went TJ Hockenson over Mark Andrews. And like I said, Kirk Cousins and him are building a good chemistry. He's getting a single coverage with a lot of defensive attention going towards Justin Jefferson in this Viking offense. And this week, I got him at 2. Number 3, Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens. So Mark Andrews, we know the last couple weeks, like I mentioned, haven't been the greatest of weeks here for Mark Andrews, where he's usually the best or second best tight end weekly for fantasy football owners. But this week here, decent matchup at Cleveland, a team obviously he knows throughout his NFL career and has had big games versus is Mark Andrews. So this week here, I think gets it back on track. I know Lamar Jackson isn't 100% and possibly might not play in this game, but he's a big target. I think he could find the end zone in this game at Cleveland, and I'm still going to roll the dice with him and put him at 3. Number 4, Dalton Schultz of the Dallas Cowboys. So the Cowboys here, they've been rolling of late, even though last week they definitely had a scare versus the Houston Texans in Dallas. But this week here, pretty good matchup with the Jacksonville Jaguars, where they've had trouble on defense this season, and they give up a decent amount of fantasy points to tight ends as well. We saw Okonkwo score a touchdown last week for the Tennessee Titans, and even Austin Hooper have a decent ball game. So this week here, with a good rapport with Dak Prescott and a weak tight end position it's been this season in fantasy football, I think Dalton Schultz has a good ball game, and I got him at 4. Number 5, Evan Ingram of the mentioned Jacksonville Jaguars. So last week, what a ball game with 162 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns for Evan Ingram. He was a man possessed out there. He couldn't be covered by that Tennessee Titan defense. And this week, obviously, it's going to be a tougher task, but he's definitely a guy that you got to bump up the ratings, especially it takes one good ball game or 2 to bump up the tight end rankings this week, because this season it's been a train wreck at tight end position. There's only been 3 or 4 consistent guys. And Evan Ingram, for the most part, he's been pretty decent over the last month of the season. So this week here, I know it's a tough matchup on paper versus the Dallas Cowboys. But like I said, he's the number 2 option in this passing game behind Christian Kirk. And I think he has a decent one. Number 6, George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers. So Kittle definitely a bust where he was drafted this season in fantasy drafts, going 3rd or 4th round in most leagues. And this week here, decent matchup at the Seattle Seahawks, Thursday Night Football, between these 2 division rivals in the NFC West. So right now, George Kittle, only 2 monster games the whole season. But Deebo Samuel's out now a few weeks with the ankle injury, and more targets got to go somewhere. So I think Kittle's going to pick up some of the targets. In this one, he's not going to be blocking as much. They're going to have him go out there and run some routes. And usually on these primetime games, believe it or not, George Kittle's been a good player. So this week, I got him at 6. Number 7, David NJOKU of the Cleveland Browns. So him and Deshaun Watson were on the same page in last week's ball game, even though the Cleveland Browns have been struggling offensively to punch a lot of balls into the end zone. But NJOKU last week with 18 fantasy points in PPR leagues. He's got a decent matchup versus the Baltimore Ravens, where their defense is leaky at times, and you can move the football against them. And NJOKU's having the best season of his NFL career, no doubt about it. The only thing with him has been the ankle injury on and off for the season, but as long as he's healthy and he can play, he's definitely a top 10 tight end weekly. And this week I got him at 7. Number 8, Cole Kmet of the Chicago Bears. So Cole Kmet, it's been a pretty decent breakout season here for him. I know on the road this season the numbers have been horrible, but this week here, another home game for Cole Kmet versus the Philadelphia Eagles. And this is a ball game where they're probably going to be chasing points early and often. And to be honest, this Bear offense, for the most part, over the last month of the season, it's either been Justin Fields running or Cole Kmet making plays. And Cole Kmet, he was on a tear a few weeks ago where he had 5 touchdowns in 3 games. So this week here, I like it versus Philly with the game script where they're going to have to pass. He's been a matchup problem for most linebackers or safeties, whoever you put on him. And this week, I think he has a good ball game, so I got him at 8. Number 9, Pat Friermuth of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if Mitchell Trubisky does start this game, he's a Friermuth favorite. Right here is Mitchell Trubisky. Gets him the ball a lot. Kenny Pickett still got the ball to Friermuth a decent amount. But Trubisky, for whatever reason, is zeroed in this season on Deontay Johnson and Friermuth and the starts he's had this season. So this week here, good matchup at the Panthers. Defense not that great. I know last week Will Disley and Noah Fant didn't do anything in that ball game, but Pat Friermuth's definitely a better tight end than those guys and more of a vocal point in his offense than a Fant than a Disley. So this week here, I think Friermuth could get 5-6 catches in this ball game, 50-60 yards, and that's a decent PPR day, especially the way we've seen tight end be a bad position this season. Number 10, Greg Dulcich of the Denver Broncos. So it looks like Brett Rypien is going to start in this ball game, and obviously that's not good news for a Jerry Jeudy, a Sutton, or Dulcich. Well, like I said, tight end's a weak position. Dulcich, at least he's been getting 7-8 fantasy points minimum over the last couple weeks, and he's a tight end that's a rookie. He's got fresh legs, no doubt about it, and he's a matchup problem for most linebackers and safeties as well, is Dulcich, with his route running ability and yards after catch ability. So this week here in a weird type of ball game in Denver once again, I think he could have a decent ball game versus Arizona. Their defense isn't all that great, and I got him at 10. Number 11, Oziogam Okonkwo of the Tennessee Titans. So last week was a breakout game for him, and reports were coming out last week before Sunday's game where they were going to expand the role more and get him more targets, and that exactly happened, where he had 16 fantasy points in PPR leagues, finding the end zone, and also a 2-point conversion he added on as well. So in a game where they're probably going to be chasing points or a potential shootout at the Los Angeles Chargers, and it's always a great thing to be indoors and turf, I think Okonkwo could carve out a decent ball game, 8 to 10 fantasy points possibly, and I got him at 11. And the 12th and final tight end I'm ranking this week's Gerald Everett of the Los Angeles Chargers. Said Gerald Everett, one good week, one bad week, and this week here a pretty decent matchup versus the Tennessee Titans that we saw just got torched for over 150 yards by Evan Engram last week. So Everett here, I know he's 4th or 5th fiddle in this offense now with Mike Williams back. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, even a Joshua Palmer are ahead of him in targets-wise for this team. But I think he's a guy that can find the end zone in this one and maybe get 20, 30 yards. And he's a better option than some of these other tight ends, like a Cade Otton, who's been up and down. Tyler Conklin, you haven't got much out of him, obviously, over the last few weeks. And a guy like Trey McBride, who has good upside, but hasn't done anything. So I got Everett at 12, so that's the top 12 tight ends I'm ranking here for Week 15 of the fantasy football season.